Cycling for me has never been about the bikes. They've only ever been the prerequisite tool. I do not see just a bike race, I see riders on heroic journeys and warriors doing battle. At one point, cycling was the most popular sport in Europe because newspapers told magnificent tales about epic races and crafted the great champions into legends. But with the advent of television, cycling lost some of its mystique, and that golden age of journalism and narration has perished. So now let us try to return some romance to the beautiful sport. Let us praise and give glory to phenomenal performances to be remembered for decades to come. Let us dwell on the moments that inspire and move us. Let us chronicle the rise and fall of heroes. Let us chart these life-changing journeys, these cycling Odysseys. All right, welcome back to another episode of Cycling Odysseys. I'm your host, Patrick Santino. So again, this is the 4 days of introduction. This is stage 3. Again, I was hazy what exactly I could cover over the course of the 4 days from a year ago. And so I was slightly confused what I was going to talk about on stage 3. But then I re-listened to it. And this one basically lays out the case of why I chose the name Odysseys for the podcast. Okay, so Cycling Odysseys. Where does Odysseys come from? Okay, it should already be fairly obvious from both the first and second stages. But anyways, I lay out that full case here in stage 3 in the 4 days of introduction. Anyways, this is stage 3 of 4, of course. And I'm planning, after these first 4 stages of introduction, first 4 days of introduction, I'm planning for the rest of January to give the cross season its due. So I'll focus on that first, and then hopefully I fall into the regular rhythm of a regular road season, unless we have another bunch of stupid COVID lockdowns, and I don't know, everybody in the world is sick of that, obviously. So hopefully we have a traditional road season there. I'll kind of try to lay out more what I'm going to do in the 4th episode, but we'll see. And so mostly just hang on to it. If you haven't heard this before, this one, it's pretty good again, as usual, hopefully. And then, so it's worth the listen if you haven't listened to it. If you have listened to it, it might be worth the re-listen, but no sweat if you just skip to the next thing. So with that, here we go. Introduction Stage 3. Every bike race. A mini Odyssey. After fighting with the Greeks for 10 long years to capture Troy, Odysseus's and the Greeks' mission was finally accomplished when Odysseus came up with the foolproof plan involving a wooden horse. And his reward for bringing antiquity's most famous war to a close? 10 more years of arduous journeying home to his island of Ithaca. On that long journey, Odysseus crisscrossed the Mediterranean world, sailing from island to island, surviving storms and shipwrecks. He even made a trip to the underworld. He encountered psychedelic lotus eaters, massive whirlpools, sea monsters, monsters with one eye, bags of wind, cannibals, shapeshifters, hypnotic singing sirens, and forbidden cattle. Many and more than just the classic gods of Greek mythology showed up throughout the whole adventure. Some aided him, some captured him, some worked for his destruction. And thus, finally landing on Ithaca's shores once more, he found the island changed, his estate changed, his family changed, and he himself changed. The Odysseus who returns to Ithaca is not the same Odysseus who left 20 years before. He is not even the same Odysseus who victoriously left Troy 10 years before. Lovers of literature, wise men, and psychoanalysts consider this story one of the ultimate examples of a hero's journey. The hero's journey is the story of a human, usually one many of us can relate to, who leaves the normal and comfortable life they've always known and crosses a threshold into the wild where unpredictable adventures await. Along the way, the hero makes friends and enemies, meets mentors, is given gifts to aid his quest. The hero goes on to accomplish great deeds and feats of fame he or she did not think they were capable of. Ultimately, the hero achieves their goal, finds their treasure, rescues their loved ones, kills the dragon, or wins the fight. Thus, the quest is accomplished, and it is time to return to normal life. But when the hero gets home, they realize they are irreversibly changed, usually for the better. It is not so much the gains and glory of the quest that has irreversibly changed the hero. It is the journey and the achievement of the quest itself that has grown the hero into a better version of themselves. Yes, in the Odyssey, such transformations happen to Odysseus over the course of his journey. And thus, as described in the previous 2 stages, I am sure you can tell where I see the hero's journey in our contemporary world. Yes, I see narratives of bicycle racing easily lending themselves to the hero's journey formula. Before discussing the heroes themselves, let us compare the adventures of these journeys. When one sees the route of the Grand Tours circling or sometimes zigzagging around or across France, Italy, and Spain, does not the map of Odysseus' plotted route around the Mediterranean quickly come to mind? Are there not similarities between the winds that blow Odysseus off course constantly compared to the crosswinds that detonate and ravage a bicycle race? To pass through an ordeal or hurdle like that of Scylla and Charybdis seems comparable to how the riders of Paris-Roubaix feel when they manage to conquer the ferocious Trench of Arenberg cobblestone section that always manages to catch a dozen men out, ruining their race prospects. To see a cyclist skid across the road in a gnarly crash is as treacherous as a hero's ship being ripped apart by the waves or hurled against the jagged rocks of a rough coastline. To sail from island to island and rest reminds one of the cyclist's nightly recovery process in a stage race, or even the full rest days of the Grand Tours. To pioneer and explore the places where no men have gone before, whether to a new island or beyond the river Styx to the underworld. Surely that is the feeling the cyclists have when they lead the race over a great and grisly mountain pass, far from safe and comfortable villages nestled in the valleys far below. When the rains are fierce or even turn to snow or hail, then surely the experience speaks for itself how it is related to an ancient hero's ship being tossed around at sea, and then the shipwrecked men surviving a brutally chilly night with little supplies. The jerseys, the prizes, and the trophies the men go on to win in cycling surely sound like the gold, treasure, and gifts the ancient heroes won as well. And surely the feeling of accomplishment and completion and conclusion that the hero experiences when they finally reach Ithaca or any other home is how every rider of the tour feels when they finally reach Paris. Yes, a plethora of cycling adventures are comparable to those faced by the heroes of epic literature. With that said, let us now turn back to the steps of a hero's journey itself, for those are also comparable to cycling. Reviewing all the hero's journeys of literature, anyone can be a suitable choice for the main hero role, man or woman, from great king or emperor down to lowly slave. The only common starting point of all the heroes is that they are in an environment they seem to understand or can even control. In cycling, many heroes' journeys start when they see a cycling race for the first time, on TV or in person, or have read about a great race in the paper. They receive their call. Their road to professional cycling begins in that moment. Thus they work and struggle to buy a bike, learn how to race with the help of friends and mentors. They are given the proper gear, and finally, when they have mastered the local criteriums, they travel to far lands trying their luck in the bigger races. By then, surely they have crossed the threshold into a world of unknown adventures. Think of all the North and South American, Australian, Asian, African, and even British riders that make the quest to continental Europe to pursue their dreams of professional racing. Not only is the transition rough, for the competition is much higher, but they must settle into life in a foreign city and country where they can probably count the number of people they know on one hand. Those first couple years, these young heroes get their heads kicked in, their teeth punched out every race. They never feel they properly recovered between these ordeals of endurance. They become bruised and battered. Many of them give up and forsake the quest. Yet some, the most elite, go on to ride the biggest classics, the most prestigious single-day races, and biggest week-long stage races. The ones that prove themselves there are given a spot in their team's Grand Tour lineup. To do a single-day classic or week-long race can be a mini hero's journey of its own, for so much can happen in a matter of hours or over the course of a couple days. People have gone from zero to hero many times in the course of these races. But for a rider to do their first Grand Tour, that will 100% of the time be a hero's journey on its own. A hero's journey within the cyclist's career hero's journey. All the cyclists by that point will be experienced racers, but no week-long or 10-day stage race can prepare them for the uncomfortable beasts that the Grand Tours are. Every interview you hear from a youngster in their first Grand Tour is that he cannot believe how hard the first week was raced. He assumes the race will settle down the further in they go. To their disappointment, it does not. Nothing can put more proverbial hair on a cyclist's chest than completing a Grand Tour. They finish physically stronger, tactically more astute, psychologically more formidable. And then, there are the riders in the Grand Tours, the classics, and the stage races that do anything worthy of public note. The top races of the sport provide conditions for the cyclists to reach their zenith, to have their day of glory, to fulfill their childhood dreams, to be forever irreversibly changed. Over the course of a handful of hours, Matt Heyman went from journeyman cyclist at the tail end of his career to feel-good hero of the decade when he won the stunning 2016 edition of the single-day classic and monument he had been chasing after for 15 years, Paris-Roubaix. Colombian Egan Bernal entered the 2019 Tour de France as a dark horse contender, but still one much too young and inexperienced. And yet he walked away with the yellow jersey and became the first Colombian Tour winner. It was quite a celebration when he came back to home roads to celebrate with all those rabid cycling fans. Bernal took that yellow jersey off the shoulders of Frenchman Julien Alaphilippe, who had become a hero to the French people as he unexpectedly battled against the inevitable downfall, like Hector did at Troy centuries ago. And to see Slovenian Tadej Pogačar accidentally slay his compatriot mentor Primož Roglič at the 2020 Tour, I felt like I watched young Beowulf rise to prominence by slewing the monster Grendel. But instead of killing a monster, Pogačar committed a spicy act of fratricide. Yes, these riders complete such feats, and they are no longer the same. Not just because they now have a splendid new jersey, but for all they achieve along the way of their quest. And yes, you have guessed rightly, it is not limited only to the victors of these races to be the heroes. All the riders, even the ones that crash out, their support crews, the race organizers, and the journalists that follow in tow complete heroes' journeys of their own. Thus I believe I have laid out the case for why this show shall be called the Cycling Odysseys. It shall chronicle the riders who are heroes, and over the course of their journeys they are changed like Odysseus was in the Odyssey. There are a bountiful supply of heroes' journeys to pick from: Gilgamesh, Dante, King Arthur, Shackleton, Neo, or Luke Skywalker, to name a few. But I have chosen Odysseus, because his is arguably the most famous hero's journey, and it reminds also of Homer's war epic, the Iliad, whose presence in my mind while watching cycling has already been touched on in previous stages. So now we near the end of the introduction of many stages. This penultimate stage is finished. Only one more remains. Alright, so this is another one that probably needs to be re-recorded in the future. My reading skills last year just weren't up to snuff. Like, I really actually, that was one good thing that I kind of didn't expect to come up, was I got way better at reading aloud doing this podcast. So just word to the wise, everybody can do that. If you want to get better at reading aloud, just do a podcast that's scripted. Anyways, I got to the point, I was re-listening to it, and I left this one in. I should have re-recorded it, but I left it in because when I was listening to the comparisons between Odysseus' Odyssey and the like famous bike racing challenges like crosswinds and the cobbled sectors of Roubaix, it made me chuckle how I am now. So I thought, all right, I don't have all the time in the world, so I'm just gonna leave this one as is and just go on and do other stuff. If you listen to this one, which if you got to this point you probably did, clearly, obviously, there's heavily Joseph Campbell, Hero's Journey, the 18 steps, whatever it is. I read Hero with 1,000 Faces is the famous book, heavily influenced by that. Joseph Campbell, heavily influenced by Carl Jung of archetype fame. Biggest Jungian of the 21st century who has a podcast is Jordan Peterson, of course. So I like to listen to him. I think he was just getting healthy again last year around the time that I wrote this. So I was probably starting to heavily listen to his stuff again, which is probably where I got the idea to even have this episode. I think that's pretty explicitly clear. That's the thing. I recently I made a Goodreads account. I guess follow me if you want, Patrick Santino, and I update it kind of regularly now. So like anyone that looks at that and then listens to anything that I write up, full disclosure, you're gonna obviously see parallels between whatever I recently read and then most certainly all the stuff that I've loved the most. It's going to keep popping up as inspiration for this podcast. So I don't know. It's pretty. Like I've looked at it myself and like looked back at it myself based on like the reading schedules and stuff, and it's I don't know, it's uncanny how often I can explicitly say, "Yep, that's where I got the idea." I'll try to point them out because one of the things I'm going to try to do is the good thing about working so hard at this last year, which I did for about half the year, I guess, or 7 months of the year through July. And then I finished up in December. So really 8 months. So one good thing about that is that lots of the stuff should be reusable, especially for people that haven't seen it, but maybe even people that have listened to it, they would want to relive it, in quotes. Some of the best ofs, I'm going to be reprising them as like lead ups to some of the big races this year. And so I'll try to kind of point out what was influencing me with some of those too. So I don't know, look out for that. Anyways, for this episode itself, the naming Cycling Odysseys, Grand Tours, careers, they're an Odyssey. I mean, what else can you say? I mean, that's how I got the name of the podcast. And you listen to this episode, I think that was a pretty convincing case, right? Again, I'm heavily biased, but so be it. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Maybe you didn't. Send me an email if you didn't enjoy it. Or you send me an email if you got a critique or challenge. cyclingodysseys@gmail.com. And I'll respond. No doubt. Follow me on Twitter, Cycling Odysseys. Find the blog post at cyclingodysseys.com. Thank you for listening. Vive le cyclisme.